All right, last step that we have to do is getting our subfloor on this floor frame. Once the subfloor is up, then your floor is ready to go. I mean, it's done. Wall frame can start happening, and really, this house will really start taking shape. Um, Before I get into the video, there's going to be some questions I'm going to have for y'all. So grab your pen and paper. Get ready to write those down. There's going to be 3 questions today. So, um, first thing, subfloor. What this is, it is a wood structural panel. I'm using OSB. Um, Plywood can be used also, but it's a wood structural panel. It's laid directly on top of the joist. It provides a walking and working surface once it's on. Also, the reason why they call it subfloor is that this is not your finished floor. Your finished floor will sit on top of this. So if you have carpet, your carpet padding will go down and your carpet will go right on top of this. Or if you have hardwood floor, you put down an underlayment and then you put down your hardwood floor. Tile, same thing. Vinyl flooring, you might have to put in a thin piece of really smooth hardwood or plywood, and then you put your vinyl on there. So there's numerous floor coverings, but no matter what the floor covering is, there's going to be something underneath it to support that. Like you wouldn't just put carpet over top of joist because you step in between the joists and you're going to fall right through. So here's your subfloor. So that's the definition of subfloor. Remember, we talked about that in our Zoom meeting. So that's the purpose and intent. There are a couple of options for subfloor. You can use an OSB panel, kind of like what I've got sitting here. You can use plywood. You can even take boards and run them diagonally, like a 1x6 or a 2x6. You run them diagonally, and that way it gives it a little bit of strength, and it connects the floor and everything's good. But generally these days, most everybody uses OSB subfloor because it is the cheapest and it's fast and it's very effective. So that's what we're going to be working with today is subfloor. Now, this is a smaller sheet. Again, this is a model floor. Technically, I can take one sheet of 4 foot by 8 foot OSB, lay it right down on my frame here, and I'm done. But it doesn't really show y'all how the process is done, how it's completed. So I cut the one sheet up into 7 little pieces to show you what it's like when you're installing these pieces along a real floor. So let's talk about fastening this down. You have several options. You can nail it or you can screw it down. But if you choose to nail it, that's the fastest way, it's the cheapest way. But just know, if you choose to nail this down, even with ring shank nails, eventually with everybody walking on here, there's enough flex in the thing where the nails will start to work their way out of these joists. When that nail sticks up a little bit and then you step on that OSB, that's where you're going to get a funny little squank, squonk, squank, squonk. So I'm sure that everybody watching this video has stepped on some type of a squeaky floor. To be honest with you, in my house, I've got several places that I need to walk around because there's squeaky floors, and I've got little kids, especially. I need to walk around them when they're sleeping or napping, so as I don't wake them up. So if you nail it down, just know at some point in the life of that house, when the house settles and shifts a little bit, and enough walking on it, you're going to start to have squeaky floors. So just nailing is not the best option, even though it's the fastest and the cheapest option. Now you can combine your nails with something like a subfloor adhesive or a construction adhesive. This product, liquid nails. You run this on every joist, lay it down, you nail it in place, and you're going to be pretty good. But the best way to do this, bar none, is gluing it and screwing it down. So use screws and glue, and then you're never, because like screws, they don't just sit there and back out of joists. they'll stay. So they'll never create, especially when you glue it, use glue and screws, they will never, ever have squeaky floors. So a little bit about that. When you do glue this, you're going to glue one panel at a time. So I wouldn't take my glue and run it across every joist because you're usually stepping on these joists, walking around and laying the panels down, especially your first few. So what you would do is you would stand this panel up, lay glue only where you need it, one panel at a time, lay this down, wiggle it back and forth a little bit, get it lined up, make sure that glue kind of spreads out and sticks down, and then you can fasten it down. And you'll do that panel by panel, and don't worry, they have bigger tubes of glue than this here, so you're not changing glue every like 3 panels. So that's just the fastening options that you have there. So let's get into how we put this in. Actually, one more point right before I say this. Before you lay this down, you can't, as soon as you get your blocking done, you can't just start a thing. Got to make a phone call and call in for an open floor inspection. That way your building inspector can come out and make sure all your framework is good. That way if you have to change anything, you're not trying to rip up OSB that's been glued and screwed down, because that's not fun. Take it from me. So open floor inspection, inspector gives us a thumbs up, says go ahead, keep going. The first thing you want to do is not just start your courses of paneling here. You're going to want to take a measurement, snap a chalk line to get a nice straight line for your very first one. Because as you lay these pieces in, if one piece is sticking up a little bit higher than the other, even though if it's 1/8 of an inch up, when you go to put a piece on in between it, it doesn't seat quite properly, and it's actually going to be farther out. And the next piece beside that's going to be out. And it magnifies throughout the floor. So by the time you're all the way across a 30-foot span, you're going to have some problems. So the best course of action is measuring in the length of one board, snapping a chalk line, setting that chalk line. That's going to give you the best chance at having a smooth and crisp and the best setup. So in our case, our boards are 18 inches wide. But new home, you're going to measure in 4 feet. So I'm going to make a mark on this rim joist here at 18 inches. This rim joist back here at 18 inches as well. And then I'm going to take my chalk line. Remember, get this, hook it on right on top of your marks there. Notice how I keep the chalk line elevated. I don't let it touch any of my joists until I'm ready to place it down. That's going to keep the chalk on my string, plus not give me any stray and incorrect markings. So I'm going to pull this tight and lift and release. Now, it's got to line enough here for me to follow, so I can bring my first board, make it flush on the end, bring it to my line, and then I can start fastening. So again, the whole purpose of this line is just to create, for your first one, nice and straight all the way down. Now you could get really technical with it, and you can go make marks every 4, 8, 12, 16 feet, and just snap lines the rest of the way down. You could do that. It's more time consuming, but it's also going to give you a better guide as you work through your subfloor and makes it uh, just straighter. So for y'all, ready to answer a question for you. Question number one is, what is the purpose of snapping this chalk line? Why do we snap this chalk line right here? That's question number one. When I'll answer that, I get a few things ready to start fastening this down. Okay, so remember, I said we would, in real world, you glue it before you screw it down. In this case here, I'm not gluing this because I'm going to take all this apart later on. Let's just say I've got it glued down. I'm ready to fasten this. Number one, you don't use like framing nails. You use a smaller nail that's designed for connecting subfloor to framing. Usually it's going to be an 8-penny nail, which is 2 3/8 of an inch long, or you could use 1 5/8 screws. That would work with some 3/4 tongue and groove. But basically, you don't use the 3-inch screws. You don't use the 3-inch nails because it's too much overkill, especially with the amount of screws or nails you're going to put into this thing. So now they can be done with a handheld drill like this. It takes a while. There are other drills that have what are called collated screws, which means all your screws are on a string and it has a mechanism where you just pull the trigger and press down into the board, and it's like I don't know, I guess it's a fully automatic. I don't know how to describe it, but which each time you press this down and drive the screw, you lift up, it slides another screw in place, and you just go. They make them with like a 2-foot extension, so you can just stand there and just zip, 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 zip. That's the best way to do it. I've got some in the classroom. I should have brought one home so I could demonstrate it, but you can watch a video, or maybe I'll post a link to a video there, let you guys see that. All right, so we're going to talk fastening patterns now. So I've got screws, proper size screws. I'm lined up. I'm ready to go. What you're going to do with this, there's specific patterns you need to follow, and that is along the exterior, along the supported exterior. For this board here, it's 3 sides because I'm landing on a joist here, I'm landing on the header joist and the rim joist. So supported edges, you're going to run every 6 inches. Okay, you get one screw in it here, and you get one over on the corner. Got my finger wet, man. Okay, now it's held in place. So every 6 inches. Now I could measure this out, but your inspector's not going to really measure this stuff out. So an easy way to think 6 inches, what 6 inches? Thumbs up. Thumbs up is 6 inches here, okay? And that's usually from the base of your palm, the tip of your thumb. That's about 6 inches, unless you have very small or very large hands. You know, if the distance between your 2 screws is about like this, then you're okay. So the more you do this, the more accustomed to 6 inches and what that looks like you'll just get it, and it just works a little bit better. So I'm going to work down on all my supported edges every 6 inches. And you could wind up about every 5 inches. That's okay. Just don't put them every 2 or 3 inches. That's much more than overkill. And at that point, you're wasting time and materials, and none of your employers are going to appreciate that. Now, at this piece here, I know you guys can't really see in this video I'm going to fix that. Come on, a little ride with me here. Okay. So in this video, you're going to see my piece of subfloor here and the joist that it's resting on. Just remember why we attached these joists, not marking them at 48 inches. We pushed it back 48 3/4. That's so that when our panel was laid down, it's going to land about halfway on this joist. Now, this takes a little bit of consideration for y'all to come in here, because you don't want to just take your screw and drive straight down. You want to drive a little bit at an angle to make sure that you hit and you hit properly. Now, the other thing here is you don't want to get this screw like right on the edge, because if you get too close to the edge here, it's actually going to blow out the side of this. It's not really going to end up holding a lot of material, so it's not going to be proper. I can come back here. Might be difficult to see, but right here, somebody put a screw there, and it kind of damaged this side of plywood here, so it kind of busted it out. In fact, let me show you how that worked. Okay, now you see how this piece of plywood is now bumped way out. That's not good. So you always want to have them back a ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch and run them in at an angle so they don't bust out like that. So this one here, I over-torqued that one, but that's okay. So you're coming down the line here, and you're going to every 6 inches there. I'll put you guys back on the rack here. Make sure I can see it. All right, good. Here we go. I'll get rid of this one here. All right, so that takes care of the supported edges. That's every 6 inches along the supported edge. Now, why don't I go every 6 inches along here? Well, quite frankly, there's nothing to catch with this. So I could drive screws here, but they'd just be sticking out the bottom. It's a waste of time. But I've got two intermediate joists. So along this joist, then the pattern changes. It's every 8 to 10 inches. Now, some building codes will say 12 inches, but it's a safer bet to go every 8 to 12 or 8 to 10. Okay. Okay. So 8 to 10 inches on the intermediate joist and every 6 on a supported edge. That's the correct fastening pattern for this. And this pattern would follow every board. Even if your last board is only 6 inches wide or 1.5 feet wide, you're going to follow the same pattern. If your board's real short, you're still going to follow the same pattern, because when people walk on this, when there's that live load on it, we talked about when we were talking about joist hangers, or not joist hangers, but joist installation, that live load, it's going to cause a lot of shifting and moving. So you want to make sure that it is supported properly. All right. For the rest of these pieces, as I put them in, I'm not going to follow this pattern right now. I'm just going to kind of tack them down with about 5 or 6 screws per piece. That way there's enough support where I can walk on it. But it'll save us some time in this video. So move along here. Now, when you go to put your next piece, you're going to go in one horizontal line all the way across. And what you want to make sure of is you want to leave a very small gap in between the sides of the boards. Okay, so this shorter side of the board here, you want to leave a small gap, about 1/8 of an inch. And why do we want to do that? Well, think back to any science class you've had. When things get hot in the summer, what do? They expand. So if it's in the summertime, this particular piece and this piece here, they'll heat up and they'll push a little bit out. It won't be a lot, but it'll push a little bit out. And if those are butted tight, what's going to happen? They're going to create a little ridge. They're going to hit together and they're going to create a ridge just like the mountains, right? So two tectonic plates hit each other. There's nowhere else to go, so they went up. Well, you don't want that in your floor system. So you leave a little bit of space. It's about 1/8 of an inch. An 8-penny nail you can put here, put there, tack them in, slide your panel over, fasten it down, pull those 2 nails up, and you're good to go. But you still want to make sure it follows in line, right on top of that chalk line you marked a while ago. Got a healthy gap there, and fasten it down in place. Before I get too far ahead of myself here, question number 2 for you is, what's the fastening pattern that I used on this here? How far apart did I space those screws? So write that question down and make sure I've got enough screws in here. Good to go. Once you got that down, next step in the process here. Okay, time for the next course of panel. This would fit really well right here, wouldn't it? Lands on both ends. I'm equally supported. Everything's hunky-dory, right? Wrong. Remember that we talked about in that Zoom meeting, went through the presentation, if you do all your panels in rows and columns, just like this, straight up and down, all your seams are going to be on the same joists. That's not good the way floors flex. It can crack your tile. It can buckle your hardwood. It can show little ridges in your carpet. You don't want that. So what you're going to do, instead of starting with a full piece, slide that over to the side. You're going to start with a half piece. You're going to lay that half piece down, properly install it in here. Now, just a bit of thing, if you guys are hawk-eyed, you're going to notice that, hey, there's not a joist where this piece is ending. That's because these pieces of panels were pre-cut. I just grabbed them out of the lab. They're designed for a 24-inch on center where this wouldn't have support. I didn't have the time to grab enough material to get it because they only gave us like 1 day to get back in classes to prep for all this online learning stuff. Anyway, let's just assume and pretend there's going to be a joist here. Normally, it would land on a joist halfway, just like I showed you with this last one. But I'm going to get this lined up. And same fastening pattern. Now, why do we stagger this stuff? Why am I starting my second course And by the way, they call courses, or they call rows of sheathing, shingles, other things like that. They call them courses. They're not talking about classes. They're talking about rows of shingles. But I have a whole piece here and a half piece there. This gives me a staggered pattern. And that way it breaks up all the joists where where the seams, where your panels butt together. It breaks them up. That way you won't get all those ridges, you won't get all that movement. It just makes it better. So always stagger. And again, make sure you have that small gap in between your boards there. Make sure you follow the correct fastening patterns. Fastener on down. Now, working on a one-man crew, working every course, one course at a time, that's kind of the way that you need to do it. Working with multiple people, you can kind of stair step it and get your your first section. You build over a couple of panels and then you start working back. So somebody can be on that end, laying them down to where it's stepped, and then somebody can be on this end, continuing every course. So that's just a little bit of food for thought. Again, nice, even patterns. Now, this last bit here, I'm not going to be able to fit an 18-inch wide panel in here. So you typically would measure one end, measure the other end. If they're the same, hey, great, you can cut it. If they're different, you're going to have to make sure that you're pretty close in cutting it. Some people will just lay a full piece on there and snap a chalk line at the end and cut it all off at one time. All those are options. Typically, you'll see that only when there's a small amount of overhang. Maybe say there's a foot of overhang or 3 inches of overhang, they'll do it like that. And you don't have to be exactly on the end of this. It's always nice when you finish up and you're nice and flush. But if you're in 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch, it's not really going to matter because you're going to have a 2x4 sitting on top of this. So if it's a little bit short, you put that 2x4 on, it's going to have enough support and everything's going to be okay. So don't worry if it's a little bit short. If it's hanging over a little bit, yeah, you're going to have to cut that down. Last piece, here we go. as I'm wrapping this up, I want to ask you question number 3. Question number 3, why do we stagger the OSB panels or the subfloor panels? Why are the panels staggered for installation? All right, so here we go. At this point, flooring is done, or subflooring is done, excuse me. And from here on out, you're gonna measure out, mark, chalk line, get all your walls up, and start to get your walls and get those built. So 3 questions I had you all answer. So take a look at all that, write those down, take a photo of it, submit that on Canvas, and that'll be it for this video. There'll be a few other points and some wrap-up stuff that we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have at least one more Zoom meeting talking about how do you ensure that you have the right number of materials on site for estimating correct materials. I have a few other assignments for you to do with the floor framing unit. So keep an eye on Canvas, stay current with Canvas, but watch that inbox for messages from me of what we're going to be doing in the days ahead. All right, thank y'all for joining me in this video, and y'all have a good night.